For more on Ottawa's support plan for Canada's steel sector, we're going to bring in Keanin Loomis, President and CEO of the Canadian Institute of Steel Construction. Keanin, thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Roger. Thank you.
Initial reaction to the announcement. Does it go far enough?
Well, back in May, the Prime Minister announced that his government was going to liaise with the steel industry and talk about, obviously what the impacts of the tariffs have been and what we would like to see as a result enacted into policy to help us get through this very time. So all of the things, the buckets of announcements yesterday are all topics that we have been discussing with the federal government over the last number of months, sometimes on a biweekly basis. So they've been listening and they have responded in kind and basically given the steel producers. I don't represent the steel producers. I'm in the structural steel industry, so I represent everybody that engineers our steel to make our infrastructure. But I'm very privy to these conversations, and the steel producers did an analysis for the government that showed that at these levels, they can recapture a good portion of the domestic market. This is what they need to be able to weather these difficult times. And we're particularly focused on the domestic procurement aspect. There are more details to be announced, but we believe that we should be our own best customer, that there's a lot of domestic market share out there, not just for raw steel, but for fabricated steel as well, especially with taxpayer-funded projects. So we're very happy with this announcement. It does provide us with a little bit of certainty going forward.
And what are you following with the procurement? What's your concerns?
Well, the big thing for us is to make sure that all of the rules apply not just to primary steel, but to the derivatives industry as well. So again, we buy steel, we fabricate it, engineer it for our infrastructure. Thus far, everything that has been announced to protect the industry up until yesterday had only applied to primary steel. So the fact that all of these measures are now applying to derivatives, which are different, codes, different products when it comes to international trade. And, so we're very ecstatic with that, because if you do not protect all of the various elements in the value chain, you're really not protecting the producers either, because it creates loopholes in the trading system. So that's been shored up. And just that directive, that mindset change in terms of procurement for us. Again, up until now, we've been really frustrated with the fact that this government and even the provincial governments, we seem to be the only Boy Scouts left anymore talking about our WTO obligations. Now, that old trading system is gone, and we really need to be mindful of, especially where our taxpayer-funded dollars are going. And so to have that directive and have that directive then flow down into the provinces, because of course the federal government is one customer, but the provinces are the ones that build the hospitals, the schools, the bridges. So they buy more steel, and the municipalities even more as a result. And we know the municipalities, we know the provinces are looking for direction from the federal government, and we're headed in a good direction.
And just going back, what are some of the products that will be affected by this that would have been coming in from the U.S., and how are they going to be replaced from the Canadian side?
Yeah, the biggest impact is going to be on cheap Chinese dumped steel, unfairly traded steel that's been flooding our market, especially since the Americans have closed their borders to that market. And so what has happened is the floor price of steel in this country has now gone up. It doesn't necessarily impact, the domestic stuff, although, again, now the market has opened up a little bit more. But it's that stuff that is unfairly traded. We just want to go head to head on a fair basis. And so to keep out, the Timu steel, the not only dumped, but just, really low quality steel as well. So it's going to impact the private sector probably more than the public sector. The public sector, again, we're going in that direction of making sure that taxpayer funded dollars are going to support domestic. It's going to be the private sector, so the owners, the general contractors, they are going to have to pay a little bit more in steel, but we think that is well worth it to protect the domestic steel industry. And again, all parts of the value chain.
And for those companies, how much more will they be looking at when they turn to the Canadian steel producers?
Well, that's not certain. Obviously, now everybody's going to be going out to the market to see what's happening. Obviously, we have a month as well to adjust to this. So some projects that are currently in the pipeline, you have a little bit of opportunity to plan for that. But again, this is all about keeping out unfairly traded steel. We shouldn't be comparing, the price of domestic steel to the lowest possible amount that you could get here in this market, because that always involves cheaper steel, and more it's involving pre-engineered steel, and that's where the tariffs on derivatives is really helpful to us as fabricators and builders of our infrastructure.
And just one last question: any concern, any worries out of political repercussions from south of the border with this?
No, I don't think so. And I think, in fact, we're preparing ourselves for CUSMA renegotiations. One of the things that we haven't talked about yet that I think is going to be really important is increased enforcement and what's coming into our country. Because the Americans have, the 232 tariffs are ostensibly to stem the flow of Chinese steel coming into America. Why we've been caught up in that, that's something that we've had to deal with as a country over the last year, psychologically. But it is about the unfairly traded steel. So if we're acting as tough as they are vis-a-vis Chinese steel, and stepping up our enforcement so that they know that we're not going to be a transshipment point for Chinese steel to come in through the land borders, I think, in fact, we're positioning ourselves really well for renegotiations with the U.S.
Okay, we'll leave it on that. Then, Keanin, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Keanin Loomis is President and CEO of the Canadian Institute of Steel Construction.